The rain came down like someone had opened a faucet in the sky. Not the gentle kind of rain that makes you want to curl up with a book, but the angry cold kind that soaks you to the bone in seconds. It was one of those March evenings in Seattle when the weather couldn't make up its mind. The morning had been beautiful, almost spring-like, but by 6 in the evening the clouds had rolled in thick and dark. David Chen was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones after a long day of listening to other people's problems. He worked as a social worker at the Morrison Community Center downtown, and Tuesdays were always rough. Back-to-back appointments, crisis calls, paperwork that seemed to multiply every time he looked away. He was 34 years old, and some days he felt twice that age. As he drove his old Honda Civic through the flooded streets, his windshield wipers working overtime, David thought about the leftover pizza waiting for him at home. Maybe he'd watch that basketball game he'd recorded. Maybe he'd just fall asleep on the couch like he did most nights. His life had become predictable in a way that was both comforting and a little sad. The traffic light ahead turned red, and David slowed to a stop. That's when he saw her. At first, she was just a shape huddled under the bus stop shelter on the corner of 5th and Madison. The plastic shelter wasn't doing much good against rain coming down sideways. As David's car idled at the light, he could make out more details. A woman, maybe in her late 20s or early 30s, pressed against the back wall of the shelter. Her clothes were soaked through, dark with water. Next to her sat a large backpack that looked like it had seen better days, and beside that a shopping cart covered with a tarp. David's heart sank. He knew what that meant. He saw it every day at work, but somehow it never got easier. Here was another person with nowhere to go, trying to stay dry in a storm that didn't care. The light turned green. Cars behind him started moving. David should have driven on. He should have gone home to his pizza and his couch. That would have been the normal thing to do. The safe thing. His apartment was 15 minutes away, and he was exhausted. But David's hands turned the steering wheel right instead of going straight. He pulled over to the curb about 20 feet past the bus stop. For a moment he just sat there, engine running, wipers still going. What was he doing? He thought about all the warnings he'd heard over the years. Don't pick up strangers. Mind your own business. You can't save everyone. Then he thought about being 17 years old, sleeping in his foster family's unheated garage because there wasn't room for him in the house. He remembered what it felt like to be cold and wet and invisible. He remembered the social worker who'd actually listened to him, who'd helped him find a better placement, who'd believed he could go to college even though nobody else did. David put the car in park and rolled down his passenger window. Rain immediately started blowing in, but he didn't care. "Hey," he called out, raising his voice over the sound of the storm. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" The woman's head snapped up. Even from this distance, David could see the wariness in her eyes. She was white, with light brown hair plastered to her face. Her jacket looked like it might have been blue once, but now it was so faded and dirty it was hard to tell. She didn't move, just stared at him like he might be dangerous. David understood. If he were in her position, he'd be suspicious too. A strange man offering a ride in the rain. It sounded like the beginning of a horror story. "I'm a social worker," David said, trying to make his voice sound as unthreatening as possible. "I work at Morrison Community Center a few blocks from here. I can take you to the First Avenue shelter if you want. Or anywhere else that's safe." No strings attached. Still, the woman didn't move. She was shivering now. David could see it even from where he was parked. Her lips looked almost blue. How long had she been standing out here? "Look," David said, "I know you don't know me. I know this is weird, but it's really coming down out there and you're soaking wet. At least let me drive you to a shelter where you can get warm and dry. Please." There was something about that last word. The please that seemed to do it. The woman grabbed her backpack and started pulling her shopping cart behind her. David quickly got out and came around to help, getting drenched in the process. The cart was full of bags and what looked like more clothes, all protected by the tarp. Together, they wrestled it to the back of David's car. It barely fit, but they managed. The woman climbed into the passenger seat, dripping water everywhere. David got back in the driver's side, and suddenly his small car felt very full. He could smell wet clothing and something else. The distinct smell of someone who hadn't had a proper shower in a while. He didn't care. "Heat's coming on," David said, cranking up the temperature. "Should warm up in a minute." "Thank you," the woman said quietly. Her voice was raspy, like maybe she was getting sick. "I'm Rebecca. Rebecca Hayes. David Chen, he replied, pulling back into traffic. Morrison Community Center, right? That's where you want to go? Rebecca shook her head, hugging her backpack to her chest. The First Avenue shelter is usually full by now. They stop taking people at 5:30 and it's already past 6. David glanced at the clock on his dashboard. 6:15. She was probably right. He knew the shelters in this area, knew their schedules and capacity limits. First Avenue was the closest, but it was small and always overcrowded. What about Harmony House over on 9th? David suggested. They're bigger and they sometimes have space later in the evening. They don't take single women on Tuesdays, Rebecca said. Tuesdays and Thursdays are for families only. David was impressed despite himself. Rebecca knew the system, which meant she'd been navigating it for a while. That was both good and bad. Good because she was clearly resourceful and informed. Bad because it meant she'd been homeless long enough to learn all these details. Okay, David said, making a decision that surprised even himself. How about this? Have you eaten dinner? Rebecca looked at him suspiciously. Why? Because I'm hungry, and there's a diner about 10 minutes from here that makes pretty decent burgers. My treat. We can figure out the shelter situation after we eat something warm. Sound good? For a long moment, Rebecca didn't answer. David could almost see her weighing the risks in her head. Getting in the car was one thing. Going to a secondary location with a strange man was another. But the alternative was going back out into that rain with no place to go and nothing to eat. Okay, she finally said, but somewhere public. With lots of people? Absolutely, David agreed. Mel's Diner on 12th. It's always packed. They have the best pie in Seattle too, if you like pie. They drove in silence for a few minutes. The rain was starting to let up a little, but the streets were still flooded. David's car sent up sprays of water as they drove through puddles. The heat was finally kicking in, and he could see Rebecca starting to relax just slightly, the tension in her shoulders easing. Can I ask you something? Rebecca said suddenly. Sure. Why did you stop? Most people just drive right past. They don't even look. David thought about that for a moment. It was a good question. I grew up in foster care, he said. Had some rough years. There was a time when I could have ended up in your situation pretty easily. I guess I remember what it feels like to need help and have everyone look right through you like you're invisible. Rebecca nodded slowly. She understood that feeling all too well. Also, David continued, I spend 40 hours a week trying to help people at my job. Seemed kind of hypocritical to just drive past someone who clearly needed help, you know? I mean, what's the point of any of it if I don't practice what I preach? Most people would say you're crazy for picking up a stranger, Rebecca observed. Yeah, probably, David admitted with a small laugh. My friend Carlos is always telling me I'm too trusting. Says I'm going to end up in trouble one day. And are you? In trouble, I mean? Rebecca asked. And there was something almost playful in her tone now, like maybe she was testing him. Are you planning to rob me? David shot back. My shopping cart full of wet clothes is worth way more than your Honda, Rebecca replied, and David caught the hint of a smile on her face. It was the first smile he'd seen from her, and it changed her whole appearance. Despite the wet hair and the exhaustion evident in her face, David could see that Rebecca was probably quite pretty when she wasn't fighting to survive. There was intelligence in her eyes, a sharpness that homelessness hadn't dulled. They pulled into the parking lot of Mel's Diner, a classic 1950s-style restaurant with bright neon signs and chrome everywhere. Through the windows, David could see it was busy, full of people escaping the rain and enjoying dinner. Perfect. Listen, David said before they got out. I know this is awkward. I know you don't know me. But I promise this is just dinner. No expectations, no weird ulterior motives. Just two people getting out of the rain and eating some food, okay? Rebecca studied his face for a long moment, and David let her. He had nothing to hide. Whatever she was looking for, she must have found it because she nodded. Okay, she said. But I'm getting the pie. They got out of the car, leaving Rebecca's shopping cart locked in the back. David noticed she kept her backpack with her, clutching it tightly as they walked to the entrance. He didn't comment. He understood. When you had so little, you protected what you had. As they walked into the bright, warm diner, shaking water off their jackets, David realized his quiet Tuesday evening had taken an unexpected turn. He had no idea where this was going or if he was doing the right thing. All he knew was that Rebecca needed help, and he was in a position to offer it. Sometimes he thought that's all you can do. Show up, be present, offer kindness when the world offers none. The hostess led them to a booth near the back, and as they slid into the red vinyl seats, neither of them could have possibly imagined that this rainy Tuesday evening was the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. But that's how the most important moments often happen, not with fireworks or grand announcements, but quietly, simply in a diner booth while the rain falls outside. The warmth of Mel's diner wrapped around them like a blanket. Rebecca could feel her fingers starting to tingle as blood flow returned to them. She'd been cold for so long that she'd almost forgotten what warm felt like. The diner smelled like coffee and fried food and something baking in the kitchen. Her stomach growled loudly enough that David heard it from across the table. "When did you last eat?" he asked, not in a judgmental way, just curious. Rebecca had to think about it. Yesterday morning. There was a church group handing out breakfast sandwiches near the waterfront. David's expression flickered with something that looked like pain, but he didn't say anything. He just picked up the menu and started reading off options. Okay, so they've got burgers, obviously. Club sandwiches. Meatloaf, which is surprisingly good here. Chicken fried steak if you're really hungry. Oh, and breakfast all day if you want pancakes or eggs or whatever. A waitress appeared at their table, an older woman with gray hair pulled back in a bun, and the name tag Dorothy pinned to her uniform. She looked at Rebecca with kind eyes that didn't judge, and Rebecca felt something in her chest loosen just a little. "What can I get you folks?" Dorothy asked, pulling out her order pad. "I'll have the bacon cheeseburger with fries," David said. "And coffee, please." Rebecca stared at the menu, overwhelmed by choices. When you spend months eating whatever you can find or whatever people hand you, having options becomes paralyzing. Everything sounded good. Everything sounded impossible. "Take your time, honey," Dorothy said gently. "The meatloaf," Rebecca finally said. "And mashed potatoes and—" "Could I get a glass of milk?" "Of course you can," Dorothy said, writing it down. "You want some soup to start?" "We've got tomato today, homemade." Rebecca looked at David, unsure if that was okay. He nodded. "Sure, bring her the soup too." After Dorothy left, Rebecca set her backpack on the seat beside her but kept one hand on it. Old habits. In the shelters, in the camps, you learned fast that turning your back on your belongings was a good way to lose them. "So," David said, leaning back in the booth, "how long have you been out there?" Rebecca had expected the question, but it still made her uncomfortable. 8 months. Give or take. That's a long time. Sometimes it feels like forever. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I had a normal life. Rebecca traced a pattern on the table with her finger, not meeting his eyes. "I know what you're thinking. How does someone end up homeless? Must be drugs, right? Or mental illness? That's what everyone assumes." "I wasn't thinking that," David said quietly. "I work with homeless folks every single day. I know there are 1,000 different roads that lead to the same place." Rebecca looked up at him, surprised. Most people either pitied her or judged her. David seemed to be doing neither. "You really are a social worker." "Really am. 7 years now. Before that, I was barely making it myself." He paused as Dorothy brought their drinks. "You don't have to tell me your story if you don't want to, but I'm a good listener if you do." Rebecca wrapped her hands around the cold glass of milk, enjoying the condensation on her palms. She couldn't remember the last time someone had offered to just listen. "I was a graphic designer," she started, and even saying it felt strange, like talking about a different person. "Had my own little apartment in Capitol Hill. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I was doing okay, you know. Freelance work mostly. Some contract stuff with a marketing firm. Graphic design," David said, sounding interested. "That's cool. What kind of stuff did you design?" "Logos, mostly. Website layouts. Some print work for local businesses. I liked it. I was good at it." Rebecca took a sip of her milk, and it was so cold and fresh that she almost wanted to cry. "Then I got sick. Really sick. Appendicitis, except I didn't know that's what it was. I thought I just had food poisoning or something. By the time I went to the ER, my appendix had burst." David winced. "That's serious." "Yeah, I was in the hospital for a week. Had surgery, complications, the whole thing. And I didn't have health insurance." Rebecca laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'd been meaning to sign up. I kept putting it off because freelancer plans were expensive and I was young and healthy. Stupid." "Not stupid," David said. "Human." Dorothy appeared with Rebecca's soup, and Rebecca realized she was shaking as she picked up the spoon. The soup was hot and rich and tasted like actual tomatoes, not from a can. She ate it slowly, trying not to seem desperate even though she wanted to inhale the whole bowl. The hospital bill was $68,000, Rebecca continued between bites. $68,000. I'd tried to work out a payment plan, but I'd already missed work while I was sick. The marketing firm dropped my contract because I couldn't meet a deadline while I was, nearly dying. Freelance work dried up. I couldn't pay rent. My landlord wasn't understanding. You got evicted, David said, 3 months after I got out of the hospital. I tried everything. Moved in with a friend for a while, but her boyfriend didn't like it. Stayed in my car until it broke down and I couldn't afford to fix it. Then I was just out here. She gestured vaguely at the world beyond the diner windows. It happens faster than you'd think. One day you have a life and the next day you're sleeping under a bridge wondering how it all fell apart. David was quiet for a moment, and Rebecca appreciated that he didn't rush in with empty platitudes or false optimism. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. I almost ended up homeless when I aged out of foster care. I was 18, had nowhere to go, no family to fall back on. I was sleeping on a friend's couch, but that wasn't going to last forever. Then I got lucky. A social worker at my high school helped me apply for college, helped me get financial aid, connected me with a program that provided housing for former foster youth. Without her, I probably would have ended up on the streets. Is that why you became a social worker? Rebecca asked. Part of it. I wanted to be that person for someone else, the one who shows up and actually helps instead of just passing by. He smiled a little, though my friends think I take it too far sometimes. Like picking up strangers in the rain. Your friends are probably right, Rebecca said, but she was smiling too. I could be a serial killer. Are you? Not yet. The day's still young. Dorothy brought their food and Rebecca's eyes went wide. The meatloaf was huge, smothered in gravy, with a mountain of mashed potatoes on the side and green beans. It was more food than she'd seen in one place in months. She picked up her fork and knife and then just sat there overwhelmed. You okay? David asked. I don't want to eat too fast and get sick, Rebecca admitted. When you haven't had much food for a while, your stomach kind of forgets how to handle it. Take your time. We're not in a hurry. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Rebecca forced herself to eat slowly, savoring every bite. The meatloaf was seasoned perfectly. The mashed potatoes were creamy and buttery, and the gravy was rich and warm. It was the best meal she'd had in forever. David watched her eat, and Rebecca could tell he was thinking about something. Finally, he spoke up. The shelters are probably all full by now. First Avenue definitely is. Harmony House isn't taking singles tonight. St. Mark's is men only. The Valley Street shelter is closed for renovations. Rebecca nodded. She knew all this already. She'd been planning to spend the night under an overpass she knew, where she could stay relatively dry. It wouldn't be comfortable, but she'd survived worse. I have a couch, David said suddenly. At my apartment. It's not much, but it's dry and warm. You could crash there tonight. Just for tonight until we figure something else out. Rebecca's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She stared at him. You're inviting a homeless woman you just met to sleep on your couch? When you say it like that, it sounds crazy. It is crazy. David ran a hand through his hair, looking a little embarrassed. Look, I know how this sounds, but it's pouring out there. All the shelters are full and you're clearly exhausted. I've got a couch, a bathroom with a shower, and some leftovers in the fridge. It's just for one night. Tomorrow I can help you navigate the system better. Maybe call in some favors at work. You don't even know me, Rebecca said, but her voice was softer now. I know you're a person who needs help. That's enough. Rebecca looked down at her plate. Every instinct told her this was a bad idea. You didn't go home with strangers, especially men you'd just met. That was how people got hurt. That was how people disappeared. But she was so tired, so cold, so worn down from months of constant vigilance and discomfort and fear. And there was something about David that felt safe. Maybe it was the way he'd offered help without expecting anything in return. Maybe it was the way he talked about his own struggles without making it about him. Maybe she was just desperate enough to take the risk. Just one night, she said finally. Just one night, David agreed. Tomorrow we figure out something better. They finished their meal and David ordered pie to go, 2 slices of apple, warm with ice cream on the side. Dorothy brought the check and David paid without even looking at it. Rebecca wanted to protest. Wanted to say she'd pay him back somehow, but she knew that was impossible right now. As they walked back out to David's car, the rain had stopped. The streets were still wet, reflecting the city lights like mirrors. The air smelled clean and fresh, the way it always does after a storm. Rebecca's shopping cart was still in the back of the car, untouched. David's apartment was a 15-minute drive, in an older building in the Central District. It wasn't fancy, 3 stories, brick exterior, the kind of place built in the 70s and never updated. They carried Rebecca's cart up the stairs together, David taking most of the weight. His apartment was on the 2nd floor, number 2B. When David unlocked the door and flipped on the lights, Rebecca saw exactly what she expected. The apartment of a single guy who worked too much to care about decorating. A couch that had seen better days. A coffee table covered in papers and mail. A TV on a stand. A small kitchen visible beyond. But it was clean, and it was warm, and it was more shelter than Rebecca had had in months. Bathrooms down the hall, David said, setting down his end of the cart. Towels are in the closet. You can take a shower if you want. I've got some sweatpants and a t-shirt that might fit you. They'll be big, but at least they're clean. Rebecca felt tears prickling at her eyes. A shower. A real shower with hot water and soap and privacy. Thank you, she whispered. No thanks needed, David said. I'm going to make some coffee. You take your time. The shower was everything Rebecca had dreamed about during those long, cold nights on the street. She stood under the hot water until her skin turned pink, washing away months of grime and exhaustion. She used David's shampoo and soap and didn't even care that they smelled like men's products. Clean was clean. When she came out, wrapped in a towel with her hair dripping, David had left clothes folded outside the bathroom door, along with a new toothbrush still in its package. Rebecca changed into the sweatpants and t-shirt, which indeed were enormous on her, but they were soft and warm. She found David in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He'd changed into different clothes, too, more comfortable looking. He handed her a mug without a word. They sat on the couch, drinking coffee, not talking much. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that comes when 2 people have been through something together and don't need to fill every moment with words. I'll take the bedroom, David said eventually. You take the couch. There are blankets in that closet over there. If you need anything in the night, just knock. David, Rebecca said, and he looked at her. Why are you doing this, really? He thought about it for a long moment. Because somebody did it for me once. And because it's the right thing to do. And honestly, because I couldn't live with myself if I just drove away and left you in that rain. Rebecca nodded. She understood. Some people were just built that way, wired to help even when it cost them something. That night, lying on David's couch under warm blankets with her stomach full and her body clean, Rebecca cried quietly. Not from sadness, but from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming feeling of being treated like a human being again after months of being invisible. She had no way of knowing that this was only the beginning. That one night would become 2, then 3, then more. That the man who'd stopped in the rain would become the most important person in her life. That this moment, right here, was the turning point where everything changed. All she knew was that for the first time in 8 months, she felt safe. And sometimes that's enough to start rebuilding everything else. Morning came with sunlight streaming through the living room windows. Rebecca woke up confused for a moment, not recognizing where she was. Then it all came back, the rain, David, the diner, the shower. She was on a couch in a warm apartment, not under a bridge or in a crowded shelter. She'd slept through the entire night without waking up once, which hadn't happened in months. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. Rebecca sat up, folding the blankets neatly, trying to make herself as small and unobtrusive as possible. She could hear David moving around, the clink of dishes, water running. She checked her phone, which she kept charged at the library when she could. 7:30 in the morning. You're up, David said, appearing in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee. He was dressed for work in khakis and a button-down shirt, looking professional and put together. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in a long time, Rebecca admitted, taking the offered coffee. Thank you. Again. I feel like that's all I say to you. You don't have to keep thanking me. David sat down in the armchair across from her. Listen, I have to head to work in about 20 minutes, but I wanted to talk to you before I left. About what happens next. Rebecca's stomach tightened. Here it comes, she thought. The part where he tells her she needs to leave. One night, just like he promised. She couldn't blame him. She was grateful for what he'd already done. I was thinking, David continued, what if you stayed here for a few more days, just until we can get you into a better situation? I can make some calls today, see what resources are available. My coworker Amy knows all the housing programs in the city. Maybe there's something we're missing. Rebecca stared at him. You want me to stay here? The couch isn't going anywhere. And honestly, the apartment's pretty depressing with just me rattling around in it. He smiled a little. Plus, I could use help with something if you're interested. Help with what? David pulled out his laptop from a bag near the door and opened it up. The community center where I work is trying to redesign our website and all our promotional materials. We've been using the same boring flyers for 5 years. The director keeps saying we need to update everything, make it more appealing, but we don't have budget to hire anyone. You said you were a graphic designer, right? Rebecca felt something stir in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. You want me to design stuff for the center? If you're up for it. I mean, you'd be doing us a huge favor, and it would give you recent work for your portfolio if you're trying to get back into the field. He paused. I'm not trying to make you feel like you owe me anything. You don't. But if you want to contribute somehow, this would actually really help us out. Rebecca's mind was already racing with possibilities. Layouts, color schemes, fonts. She'd spent so long just surviving that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to create something. I'd need access to a computer. And design software. You can use my laptop while I'm at work. I've got an old copy of Photoshop on here somewhere. It's not the latest version, but it works. David glanced at his watch. Look, I really do have to run. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. There's cereal, bread, eggs, whatever you can find. The Wi-Fi password is on a sticky note on the router. Make yourself at home. After David left, Rebecca sat on the couch for a long time, just processing. This stranger had picked her up in the rain, bought her dinner, given her a place to sleep, and now was offering her a chance to do what she loved again. It didn't make sense. People didn't do things like this, not in her experience. There had to be a catch. But as the days passed, there was no catch. David came home from work each evening, and they'd have dinner together. Sometimes takeout, sometimes something simple David cooked. They'd talk about their days. Rebecca would show him the designs she'd been working on, and David would offer feedback, always encouraging, always enthusiastic. The flyers she created for the community center were colorful and modern, nothing like the bland, text-heavy ones they'd been using. She designed a new logo, created social media graphics, mapped out a fresh website layout. Working again felt like coming back to life after being underwater for too long. 1 week turned into 2. Rebecca started venturing out during the day, going to the library, walking around the neighborhood. She was still scared, still waiting for something to go wrong, but slowly she began to relax. David never made her feel unwelcome. He never hinted that she should leave. He just treated her like a roommate, like someone who belonged there. You know what I realized? David said one evening as they sat eating Chinese takeout and watching a terrible action movie. This place actually feels like a home now. Before, it was just where I slept between work shifts. Rebecca looked around the apartment. It was true that things had changed. She'd tidied up, organized David's chaotic piles of paper, added small touches, a plant from the grocery store, some artwork she'd printed out and framed from thrift store frames. Nothing major, but enough to make the space feel lived in. I've been thinking, Rebecca said carefully. I got another freelance contract today. It's small, just a logo design for a local coffee shop, but it pays $300. I want to start contributing to rent and groceries. David shook his head. You don't have to do that. I want to. David, you've let me stay here for 2 weeks. You've fed me, given me a place to work, treated me like a person when the rest of the world looked through me like I was invisible. The least I can do is help with expenses. Okay, David said after a moment, but only if you're comfortable with it. And we split things fair. You pay what you can when you can. This isn't about money, Rebecca. It's about having someone to come home to who isn't just the 4 walls. That night, as Rebecca lay on the couch, her couch now it felt like, she thought about how much her life had changed. A month ago, she'd been sleeping under an overpass, cold and scared, and convinced she'd never climb out of the hole she'd fallen into. Now she had a roof over her head, work coming in, and something even more surprising, a friend, because that's what David had become. Not a savior, not a charity case manager, but a genuine friend. They had the same stupid sense of humor. They both loved old jazz records, which David had a whole collection of. They both stayed up too late watching movies and then regretted it the next morning. They talked about everything, his work stories, her design projects, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Rebecca started volunteering at Morrison Community Center 3 days a week. She'd go in with David in the morning and spend the day helping with whatever needed doing, answering phones, organizing donations, designing flyers for upcoming events. The staff welcomed her warmly, especially Amy, David's coworker, who was a force of nature with bright red hair and an infectious laugh. "David told me how you two met," Amy said one afternoon while they were sorting through donated clothes. "That's very him, you know, stopping to help someone in the rain. Does he do this a lot? Bring home strays?" Rebecca asked, half joking. Amy laughed. "No, actually. David's generous with his time at work, but he's pretty private about his personal life. I've known him for 4 years, and I've never even been to his apartment. The fact that he opened his home to you, that's significant." Rebecca thought about that conversation for days afterward. She'd been so focused on her own gratitude, her own amazement at David's kindness, that she hadn't stopped to consider what it meant from his perspective. He'd let her into his life in a way he apparently didn't do with other people. Why? The answer started becoming clear in small moments. The way David's face lit up when he came home and saw her working on the laptop. The way he always asked her opinion on things, genuinely interested in what she thought. The way they'd started having inside jokes and finishing each other's sentences. The way the apartment felt empty on the rare occasions when Rebecca was out, and David came home to a quiet space. They were becoming important to each other, in ways neither of them had quite acknowledged out loud. One Friday evening, about a month after that rainy night, Rebecca's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. "Rebecca Hayes, this is Jennifer Caldwell from Pacific Design Group. I saw your portfolio online and I'm very impressed with your recent work. Would you be available to come in for an interview next week? We're looking for a junior designer and I think you'd be perfect." Rebecca's hands shook as she hung up the phone. A real job interview? At an actual design firm? She'd been sending out her portfolio to various companies, updating it with all the new work she'd done, but she hadn't expected anyone to actually respond. "David," she yelled, not even caring that she was shouting. "David, I got an interview." He came running out of his bedroom where he'd been changing out of his work clothes. "What? Where?" "Pacific Design Group. They want to interview me next week." Rebecca was grinning so hard her face hurt. "Oh my God, I need something to wear. I can't go to an interview in borrowed sweatpants." "We'll figure it out," David said, and he was grinning too, matching her excitement. "This is amazing, Rebecca. You deserve this." They went shopping that weekend, David insisting on helping her find interview clothes even though she protested she could handle it herself. They found a nice blouse and dress pants at a thrift store, barely worn, and a blazer that fit perfectly. Rebecca stood in front of the dressing room mirror and barely recognized herself. She looked professional. She looked like someone who had her life together. "You look great," David said when she showed him. "They'd be crazy not to hire you." The interview was on Tuesday. Rebecca was so nervous she could barely eat breakfast. David gave her a pep talk before they left the apartment together, him heading to work, her heading downtown to the design firm. "Just be yourself," he said. "Show them what you showed me, that you're talented and creative and hardworking. You've got this." The interview went better than Rebecca could have hoped. Jennifer Caldwell was warm and encouraging, impressed by Rebecca's portfolio and her recent work. They talked about design philosophy, about the firm's clients, about what the job would entail. Rebecca was honest about her situation. She'd been homeless, she was rebuilding her life, and Jennifer didn't judge. If anything, she seemed impressed by Rebecca's resilience. "We'll be in touch by the end of the week," Jennifer said as they shook hands. "But between you and me, I think you're exactly what we're looking for." Rebecca floated home on a cloud. She couldn't wait to tell David. She got to the apartment before him and started cooking dinner, actually cooking, not just heating up takeout, as a celebration. She'd gotten pretty good at navigating David's kitchen over the past month. When David walked in and saw her at the stove, something crossed his face that Rebecca couldn't quite read. It was gone in an instant, replaced by his usual warm smile. "Something smells amazing," he said. "Pasta primavera. I found a recipe online. It might be terrible, but I figured we'd find out together." Rebecca turned from the stove. "The interview went really well, David, really well. She basically said I have the job, just waiting on the official call." "That's incredible," David said, and he meant it. But there was something else in his voice, something that sounded almost like sadness. They ate dinner, talking and laughing like always, but Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. After they'd cleaned up and settled onto the couch with their usual terrible action movie, she finally asked, "Is everything okay?" "You seem, I don't know, off." David was quiet for a long moment. "I'm happy for you," he finally said. "Really, I am. You're getting your life back. It's what you deserve. It's what I wanted to help you achieve. But I guess I'm realizing that when you get this job, you'll probably want to get your own place. And you should. That's the next logical step. It's just," he trailed off, running his hand over his face. "It's going to be weird having the apartment to myself again." Rebecca's heart did something strange in her chest. "David, are you saying you'd miss me?" "Of course I'd miss you. Rebecca, this last month has been, I don't know how to describe it. The best month I've had in years? Having you here, coming home to someone, having actual conversations instead of just existing alone. I'd gotten so used to being by myself that I forgot what it was like to connect with someone. And now I can't imagine this place without you in it." They looked at each other, and suddenly the air felt charged with something neither of them had been willing to name. The friendship that had grown between them was real and deep, but there was something else there too. "Something more. I'd miss you too," Rebecca said softly. "More than I probably should." "What does that mean?" Rebecca took a breath. "It means that somewhere along the way between you picking me up in the rain and us sitting here right now, you became the most important person in my life. It means I look forward to seeing you every day. It means I care about you in a way that's more than just gratitude or friendship." David's eyes widened. "Rebecca, gosh, I know it's complicated," she rushed on. "I know the circumstances of how we met make everything weird. You helped me when I had nothing, and maybe that clouds things. Maybe what I'm feeling isn't real, or maybe it is. I don't even know anymore. All I know is that the idea of leaving here, of not seeing you every day, makes me feel like I'm losing something precious." For a long moment, David didn't say anything. Then he reached out and took her hand. "I've been trying not to feel this way," he admitted. "I kept telling myself I was just being a good person, helping someone in need. That's all this was. But it's not all it is, not anymore. Rebecca, you're brilliant and funny and strong, and having you here has made me realize how lonely I was before. I think I've been falling for you, and it terrifies me because I don't want you to feel pressured or obligated or like you owe me anything." "I don't feel obligated," Rebecca said. "I feel lucky. I feel grateful, yes, but not in the way you think. I'm grateful that out of all the cars that could have stopped that night, it was yours. I'm grateful that the universe brought me someone like you. But what I feel for you, that has nothing to do with obligation." They sat there, hands linked, the terrible action movie playing forgotten on the television. Everything had just changed, had shifted from friendship into something neither of them had planned but both of them wanted. "So what do we do now?" David asked. Rebecca smiled. "I guess we figure it out together, just like we've been doing all along." Outside, rain started falling again, gentle this time. But inside David's apartment, everything felt warm and safe and full of possibility. They'd found each other in a storm, and now they were discovering that the shelter they'd built together was becoming something even stronger, something like home, something like love. The call came on Thursday afternoon. Rebecca was at the community center, helping organize donated winter coats when her phone buzzed. She saw Pacific Design Group on the screen and her heart nearly stopped. "Hello?" she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Rebecca, it's Jennifer Caldwell. I have good news. We'd like to offer you the junior designer position. The salary is $42,000 to start, with benefits including health insurance. Can you start 2 weeks from Monday?" Rebecca had to sit down. $42,000. Health insurance. A real job. "Yes," she managed to say. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much." When she hung up, Amy was watching her with a knowing smile. "Good news?" "I got the job," Rebecca said. And then she was crying right there in the middle of the donation center. Happy tears this time. Amy hugged her, and some of the other volunteers came over to congratulate her, even though they didn't know exactly what had happened. They just knew Rebecca was happy, and that was enough. David was thrilled when she told him that evening. He picked her up and spun her around right there in the apartment, both of them laughing. "I knew you'd get it," he said. "I knew it from the moment you showed me those first designs." They celebrated with dinner at a nicer restaurant than usual, a little Italian place with candles on the tables and wine glasses that caught the light. It felt like a real date, which Rebecca supposed it was. They'd been dancing around defining what they were to each other for the past week. Since that night, they'd admitted their feelings. They held hands now. They sat closer on the couch. But they hadn't kissed yet, both of them somehow nervous about crossing that line. "So with the job starting in 2 weeks," David said over pasta, "have you thought about what you want to do? About living arrangements, I mean." Rebecca had been thinking about little else. "I want to stay," she said. "If that's okay with you, I'll pay half the rent now and groceries and utilities. Real roommates." "Well, roommates who?" She trailed off, blushing. "Roommates who are dating." David finished, smiling. "Is that what we're doing? Dating? I'd like to think so, unless you're seeing other people I don't know about." Rebecca laughed. "You're the only person who'd pick up a homeless woman in the rain and end up dating her. You know that's completely insane, right? The best things in life usually are." David reached across the table and took her hand. "Rebecca, I want you to stay. Not because you need a place to live anymore, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it now. These past weeks have been the happiest I've been in years, maybe ever. Even with me hogging the bathroom and taking over your laptop." Rebecca teased, but her eyes were serious, especially then. They walked home slowly, despite the cold November air. David's hand was warm in hers. When they got back to the apartment, Rebecca stopped him before he could unlock the door. "David," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why haven't you kissed me yet?" David looked surprised, then sheepish. "I didn't want to rush you. I didn't want you to feel like that was something you owed me, or something I expected. I wanted you to know that I care about you regardless." Rebecca stepped closer. "I don't feel pressured. I don't feel like I owe you anything except maybe my gratitude for seeing me as a person when no one else would. But what I feel for you has nothing to do with debt or obligation. I'm falling for you, David Chen, and I really want you to kiss me." So he did, right there in the hallway of his apartment building, under the fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, and when they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Inside the apartment, things felt different. They'd crossed a threshold, and now everything was more real. They were really doing this, building a relationship, building a life together. It was exciting and terrifying all at once. The next 2 weeks flew by. Rebecca prepared for her new job, buying appropriate work clothes and practicing her commute to the design firm. She and David settled into their new dynamic as an actual couple. They still watched terrible movies together, still cooked dinner together, still talked late into the night. But now there were kisses and hand-holding and the comfortable intimacy of two people learning each other. Not everyone was supportive. David's friend Carlos came by one evening and pulled him aside while Rebecca was in the kitchen. "Man, are you sure about this?" Carlos asked in a low voice that Rebecca could still hear. "You don't really know this woman. She was homeless a month and a half ago. What if she's just using you?" "She's not using me," David said firmly. "And I do know her. I probably know her better than I've known anyone." "You barely knew her when you brought her home." "That's crazy, David. You're too trusting." "Maybe. But I'd rather be too trusting than too cynical to help someone who needs it." Rebecca stayed in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she washed dishes that were already clean. She knew people would think this way. She'd worried about it herself in the beginning, but hearing it out loud stung. After Carlos left, David found her standing at the sink, staring at nothing. "You heard that?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah. He's wrong, you know. He's my friend, but he's wrong about you." Rebecca turned to face him. "Is he, though?" "David, think about it from the outside. It does look weird. Woman gets picked up off the street, moves in with the guy, suddenly they're dating. People are going to assume I'm taking advantage of you. Do you care what people assume? I care what they think about you. I don't want people judging you because of me." David pulled her into a hug. "Let them judge. I know the truth." "You know the truth. That's what matters," but it wasn't just Carlos. Over the next few weeks, as Rebecca started her job and their relationship became more public, they faced other challenges. Some of David's family members had concerns. Rebecca's former friend who she'd briefly stayed with after the eviction heard through the grapevine about Rebecca's new life and left a bitter voicemail about how it must be nice to fall into such a cushy situation. The worst came from strangers. They went to a movie one Saturday night, and as they stood in line for popcorn, Rebecca heard the women behind them whispering. "That's definitely a sugar daddy situation," one of them said, not bothering to lower her voice much. "Or maybe she's a prostitute," the other replied. "You can tell by looking at her she's been rough." Rebecca's face burned. David heard it too, and she felt him tense beside her. He started to turn around, but Rebecca grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said quietly. "It's not worth it." But David was angry in a way Rebecca hadn't seen before. He turned to the women with a coldness in his voice that made them step back. "That woman you're talking about is my girlfriend. Her name is Rebecca. She's a talented graphic designer who's been through more hardship than either of you could probably imagine. And she's one of the strongest, most genuine people I've ever met. Maybe next time you want to judge someone, you could try showing basic human decency instead." The women looked mortified and quickly moved to a different line. Rebecca felt tears prickling her eyes, but this time from gratitude. David had defended her without hesitation, had called her his girlfriend with pride rather than shame. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always," he said simply. The challenges kept coming, but so did the good moments. Rebecca thrived at Pacific Design Group. Her designs were praised, and she quickly became a valued member of the team. She made friends with her co-workers, particularly a woman named Lisa, who invited her to join a design networking group. Rebecca was building a life that was truly hers. At the community center, she continued volunteering, now helping to run a workshop teaching basic design skills to other people experiencing homelessness. She knew what it was like to feel purposeless, and she wanted to help others find their way back to themselves like she had. David got a promotion at work, becoming the senior program coordinator. He was proud of the work he did, and Rebecca loved hearing about his days, about the people he helped, the programs he ran. They celebrated each other's successes and supported each other through the hard days. 4 months after that first rainy night, they celebrated Christmas together. Rebecca used her first real paycheck to buy David a vintage jazz record he'd been wanting for years. He gave her a professional drawing tablet for her design work. They cooked dinner together and watched It's a Wonderful Life, and Rebecca couldn't help thinking how much her own life resembled that movie's message, how one person's kindness can change everything.